Let me give you this small biography then, who I am. I am Brother Marshall. But I think you wish to know who I was, so I'll tell you who I was. I was Marshall Clark, Marshall Ross, Marshall Christian, Marshall Hope. They were my different surnames as I moved through life in the 20th and 21st century and on as and when it's a blessing to be so. Well, you have heard it said and it's written, the kingdom of heaven is within. And the important thing is, of course, from a narrow perspective, is that I found heaven, found God, or rather, God made himself known to me. For this is life eternal, to know him. In other words, to have received, to become conscious of his glory. That's the achievement of life, what we call life in the material, physical, space and time world. I was rejected as a baby, fostered out immediately, and neglected and rescued by a very short lady. Her name was Mrs. Short, would you believe? And her family, they were not well off by any means. They were in state housing, as you'd call it, council housing. And she rescued me. She was an angel, wasn't she, sent from God, and had me and her family with her kids for I don't know how long, a year or two. And then I had TB, tuberculosis, so I was in hospital. My right leg had stopped growing. They realised I had TB. And penicillin, early antibiotics, basically conquered that. I came out after a year and a half and went to a school in Rayleigh, Essex, England. Oh yeah, I was born in 1947. It was one of the coldest winters on record, the coldest winter on record in Europe. I mean, there may well have been colder ones back in, a few hundred years ago, but on current records. And Europe was still recovering from Second World War, or rather suffering from the aftermath of it. Rationing was getting, I think it was probably at its peak. Europe could have starved to death. But for American aid and help and support, notably in the Marshall Plan, as it was called, to stave off probable revolution, communist revolution, and unrest. A bleak time, really, except that, of course, war was over. In some sense, I mean, war is part of the classroom, isn't it, that we're in? Discord that you might know the fruit of good and evil, and choose the good in the end. It's a painful process, but my end did come. I mean, I had the love of Mum. Loved her Mum. Mum and I did everything together. Her name's Frances. And she was born 1919. Her mum was from Channel Islands, and her dad was from England anyway. My granddad, on that side. And she, during the war, had met my dad. Or perhaps she met him just after the war, not sure. But anyway, Farnborough was a place where all the military were housed, and Mum had a wonderful war in a sense. She was the best looking person in the area. The beauty queen, local beauty queen in fact. Anyway, there are the details. He fell in love with her, and she was a wonderful mum. I didn't like school. I fortunately was ill often with the after effects of the immune system being stripped by the antibiotics, the streptomycin, penicillin. So I was at home much, and that was a great blessing to me. I had much of her company. In a delightful way, I suppose, I was being homeschooled, rescued from the state system into her presence. We did everything together. You know, the washing up, the cooking, the gardening, the cleaning, the sewing even. You know, she taught me how to embroider and knit and you name it. We did it together. Shopping, loveliness. Not so much actual play, you know. I think she may have been a bit like me. Not terribly good at playing, but wonderfully good at being with. Just lovely to be with. Nightmare to Dad. Endless rows. I used to be dreading weekends because they would war and row with each other. Seldom physical violence. Very minor. I mean, a few things being thrown, you know. Nothing too serious. The odd bruised eye on Dad, but nothing too serious. Could have got out of hand. She could have killed him. And I think he knew that. He used to lock himself in at night in his bedroom. Yes, tricky, eh? Anyway, at some point at school I realized you could deliberately study what might be in the test and do well. And I did, and I somehow got to university, two of us from my year, and after some delays, because Dad didn't understand the importance of university, after 3 years I went to uni anyway, and became an economist. Did exceptionally well in one of the MA papers in history, economic history. They asked me to lecture it. Following year, would you believe it, the lecturer left for Oxford at short notice, and they asked me to lecture it. So I was launched into a comfortable life in some ways, which I sacrificed many times to attempt to go into a ministry that, thank God, did not receive me too well. I mean, possibly anything from 3 or 4 major attempts to go into the ministry to probably nearly a dozen attempts one way and another. And all of them blocked, didn't work out. You know, I had to do a U-turn at some point. Oh, I forgot to mention, came to know God by running out of money while doing the Masters, first attempt at the Masters. And someone gave me Autobiography of a Yogi, a book written by Paramahansa Yogananda. probably in 1947, I think he wrote it. And I was entranced by this book and was in love with someone who, in my mind, I'd released to who she loved. And so I was free to just be transformed by a wonderful springtime on campus, reading this book. I was on a high for about 10 days after I'd realized that I now wanted God to exist, and that I'd never wanted him to exist before. And my heart, my whole being was singing. I was writing poetry, for goodness sake, not something I'd managed before. Full of the goodness of God, the glory of God. By which I mean the awareness of such awareness, of the goodness of that which was around me. Lovely campus, nature, springtime. The book that I'd been given that was just such a blessing to me. Staggering. I resolved to have a simple but good life. So I married someone who needed rescue, and she was sweet enough to be a joy to me and such a blessing. She was a Baptist girl, young Baptist girl, about 5.5 years older than me, and I was 24. And we married. Lots of miracles started to happen of housing provisions. House in the Dutch Quarter in Colchester, Essex. Farmhouse I found by taking the school children of Hadley, Suffolk. I was teaching there, took them out on a day thing to occupy them really. Found an empty house and inquired of the farmer, who said, I've got another one up on the hill, Friars Hall Farmhouse. I could do with someone living in it so that security was better. And it was a very cheap rent, of course. And he rather liked caring for the local school teacher, one of them, He was Sir Joshua Rowley. No, he wasn't. No, he was, hang on a sec. He was Colonel Hitchcock. That's right. He kept his title, Colonel. Some people did in those days. They were so impressed with their occupations of life, It's like me calling myself an economist. I like to be impressed by the fact I was an economist at university, And he rented off someone who owned, I don't know, all the land in all the villages around. Sir Joshua Rowley, who was, someone you never actually met. All you found was his estate office to deal with, Insufferable class structure in England. Hundreds of years behind it. And much of Europe and much of the world, I suppose. But anyway, God used it all for a blessing, of course. Used it all for a blessing. Marriages, divorce, used them all for blessing. Gave me some wonderful wives. Gave me some lovely friends, astonishingly good company. Wonderful people. Won't burden you with the details, but gosh, you have some good friends in life. Value them. They're such a blessing. We help each other, you see, and I've been a good friend to many people. It sounds conceited and not very humble, doesn't it? But not much humility in me, I can tell you. I just know I've been a blessing to people. And I'm so utterly glad. So glad I've been a blessing to some. And I hope I haven't been too much of a burden to the others. Thank you, Heavenly Father. So really there's nothing of great importance. I'm a master of words, of course, and totally overconfident. I take social risks that other people wouldn't dream of risking. And that confidence is given to me by the love of Mum, who was always an encouragement. And the love of Mum is still in me, you see. It was a present from her to me to get me through life till I found God. She didn't seem to find God herself. But still, God is well able to put that right, isn't he? Not a problem with God. And Dad too, goodness. Religion was just alien to him. Stuff and nonsense, boy. Get yourself a job. Be in a job by Monday. That was his response, and I said, can I go to university? God dear, I was not thankful about that. I was not thanking him, and God didn't exist on my menu. Took a poor view of that, I did. I really felt that was the last straw, I think. Because he couldn't help it, that's what he valued. Didn't go to university himself. And was stinking rich, very well off, very comfortable. Born well off, stayed well off, died well off. But as far as I know, without the realization of God. And yet so blessed by God all his life. Wealth, beautiful wife. Well, true, hated him, but can't have everything, can you? If you had everything, you'd never learn, would you? You see, we're here to learn. We're here to come to know God and to value him truly. And when we do value him truly, wow, that's fantastic. That's just wonderful. It's life eternal. To value is to know, to appreciate, to love. How do you do that? By thanking God for everything that you see as good in your life. You'll be able to do it for little things that are not so good too. And you'll be able to trust him for everything in the end. And then that's the end of the classroom. No point in being here longer, except if you want to come back and be part of helping others. An avatar, if you like. But God doesn't need it. He's well able to do it without us. We don't have to come back. But you're welcome to if that's what you want to do. Perhaps you have someone in particular who's still here that you need to help. Or someone you see that you really would like to be involved in their salvation, if you like. Well, that's fine. But it's not a requirement. Most people go on. After all, the idea is that we become full adults in the host of heaven. Life eternal. strange thing, I know, to say you can be born into life eternal, because eternal is eternal in all dimensions, in all directions, in all dimensions. So how can you come into something that's everywhere and eternal? I don't know. I don't have to know. Just know it's so. Well, no, hang on, let's be fair. I trust it's so. And I've found it to be so. That's what counts. Thank you, Heavenly Father. So this is life eternal, to know Thee, to receive Your glory, in other words. I'm filled with the glory of God, and that is what I'm able to give. As a fortune teller told me, a palmist that my mum had me go to when I was 18 or 21, I can't remember which. He said, "Oh, you're going to be very wealthy, very successful." I said, "How do you mean?" Well, he could only think in terms of cash, couldn't he? Well, I have it in an eternal realm. I have become one of the infinite family of infinitely well-off persons, well off in every dimension conceivable and inconceivable by God. Quite simply, utterly blessed, with the blessed, which includes, of course, our Heavenly Father. Thank you, Heavenly Father.